Okay, so this video will act as a sequel to a video I done way back in season 1, and that video is called Video Games, the Greatest Form of Visual Narrative. And I've come up with a few more headings for this kind of subject, a few more pointers to why I feel the video games are the greatest form of visual narrative. So I'm going to start off this video. Okay, so the first heading, the first topic I want to bring up is the idea of video games having more faithful adaptations to that of movies. And I think the best example, of course, is the Arkham games created by Rocksteady. Now, they have really nailed what it is to be Batman. Everything about Batman they've absolutely nailed in, of course, the Arkham games. The look, the physicality of Batman, the voice of Batman, the history of Batman is all very much intact, as is the history with Robin's, as is the lore of his storyline, the lore of Gotham. All of that is very much intact. All the characters look very faithful to what they look like in the comics. All the villainous characters, they live up to their name that was once developed in the Batman universe. It does a wonderful job of creating this Batman narrative. Also, in saying that, it tells its own story, its own original story, but yet it does it whilst remaining extremely faithful to the Batman lore. I want to also talk about Telltale's Batman, because Telltale's Batman is a different take to what we've seen in the Arkham Batman. It focuses more on Bruce Wayne, how he runs Wayne's enterprise as a CEO, his relationship with Harvey Dent, his relationship with Alfred, what it's like being kind of a playboy billionaire, living up to that Wayne name, that Wayne kind of inheritance, the Wayne title. It really focuses on all those little things. It's kind of browsed into briefly in the movies, but nowhere near to the same extent. While Telltale's Batman, it does both handle Bruce Wayne and Batman, but it has a greater sense of who Bruce Wayne is. The Witcher series is based on, of course, the Witcher series of books and, of course, these short stories. And as we all know, they really nail that sense of atmosphere that is in the books and, of course, in the short stories. Okay, while Deadpool the game was kind of a very generic hack and slash type game, it did, however, really nail what Deadpool is. And this really did feel like an interactive comic. The idea of crossing the fourth wall, that crazy slapstick humor that we get from Deadpool, the type of humor that would look really kind of corny and cheesy in live action. The game really nails all that fun factor. Nolan North is perfect as Deadpool as well. All the guest appearances of the X-Men, all of them look so incredibly accurate. We've seen X-Men in movies for over a decade now, and yet we still haven't got these perfect comic book accurate versions of these characters. Now I'm going to move on to my next point. Less studio interfering. More and more films these days are getting more interfering from producers, from studio executives. And one of the big ones of recent was Suicide Squad. Now, that film, apparently reports say that the first draft was written in only 6 weeks, and then of course the shooting date was rapidly after that. There was reshoots, there was different cuts from the film, there was footage that was left out, there was reshoots, there was so many little problems with that film. Fantastic Four, same thing, to the point that the director hated that film, to the point where he said, don't watch this film, because that had a lot of reshoots. It had producers coming in to change the tone of the story, lots of little things like that, and once again material was left on the editing floor. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, that movie tried to focus more on developing the kind of Sinister Six and trying to developing spin-offs rather than actually focusing on being a sequel to The Amazing Spider-Man. It also was more campy in tone. Now, I say studio interfering. There is studio interfering in video games as well, but not to the point where the tone, the genre, and of course the director's vision is completely lost. Not to the point that we've seen in movies. Now, Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, we all know that game got cut up in terms of context, but it still feels like a Metal Gear game. It feels like something Hideo Kojima would have made. This isn't like in a movie interfering. When a movie interferes with a project, it feels like the director's vision is lost. But when a video game is getting interfered by its producer, at least the director's vision is still pretty much intact. Okay, solid movie sequels. Now this is another point I want to make. Now we've seen kind of movie sequels to movies that were released decades ago. and some of them have turned out to be absolutely awful. That of Zoolander 2, which was released this year, Dumb and Dumber 2, which felt just kind of outdated and kind of really embarrassing for Jeff Daniels and of course Jim Carrey. These films, they just felt like cash grabs. Video games, however, they've made some great sequels to movies. Ghostbusters managed to bring all the original cast back. They also had Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis as story kind of consultants. The same can be said for Back to the Future, done by Telltale. That game acts as a fourth installment to the original trilogy. It makes several references to the previous movies. Bob Gale, who was the brother of the three films, he comes back as a consultant. Christopher Lloyd comes back as Doc Brown. Michael J. Fox comes back as an older version of Marty McFly. All of it is really faithful to the original trilogy of movies. My next point is, of course, more original storytelling. Nowadays, we are getting so many reboots and remakes to original movies. And it's getting really annoying because Disney has come to the point they're remaking all these classic animated movies into live action. And thankfully, with video games, we get a lot more original storytelling. One new game I really find fascinating is We Happy Few. Game set in an alternative 1960 in a fictional English village called Wellington's Well, and these inhabitants, the population of this fictional town village, they have had these kind of traumatic past, so all of them are on this kind of antidepressant called Joy, and they're kind of all forced to actually take this pill. This pill makes them kind of really easy to control, so the press can really control them easily. And it's really interesting to see because it has kind of a day live vibe to it, but it also feels like the idea of having an alternative 1960 makes it something completely fresh and original at the same time. My last point will be narratives that require minimal story. Now, there's quite a few movies out there which are more style than substance, and that doesn't really work for a lot of critics and a lot of audience out there. This, however, can work really well for a video game. A game like Journey, in which it's more style than substance, but yet the style overcomes the substance to the point that even though the story is small, they do such a fantastic job with kind of story hints and story little image telling. That's what they do to actually drive the story and keep it passionate for the gamers. It also combines a stunning atmosphere and an incredible soundtrack, which really adds to the story. It kind of has this isolation to it. It has that haunting feel to it. And all these factors really help the actual story of the game. It's something a movie can't do right. 90 minutes, a movie that didn't have narrative, didn't have exposition, and didn't have dialogue would not really work. As a short story, yes. Video games like Journey can really do this. They can actually create a story that's passionate and filled with heart, without dialogue, without exposition, and without narrative. And saying that is truly a great achievement for video games. Okay, so these are just a few reasons why I feel that video games are the greatest form of narrative. And I'm going to put a link to part 1 of this kind of subject and this genre I created. I hope you check that video out. What do you feel about this subject and this topic? Do you feel that video games are the greatest form of visual narrative? Thanks for watching and subscribe to the channel if you like what you see.